Hey guys, welcome to session number 21 of the Trailer Music Composers Podcast. Let's dive in.
One man with one microphone whose favorite childhood movie was Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Welcome to the Trailer Music Composers Podcast.
Hey guys, welcome to another session of the Trailer Music Composers Podcast. And boy, is this an amazing session I have for you today. Now, I have got a very, very special guest on. His name is Cody Still. So those of you in the trailer music game, the trailer music nerds out there, which is probably all of you, given the title of the podcast, you will know his name for two reasons. First and foremost, for his incredible hybrid orchestral trailer music, which does the thing that I'm always striving to teach, which is providing depth and breadth of sound. What that means is you've got something right in your face, you've got something really far in the distance, you've got something all the way left, all the way right, all the way up, all the way down. It covers all of the bases. It's like a nuclear explosion in the background, someone hitting you in the face with a violin, mile-high horns going off, huge angelic choirs, massive Moog synthesizers, all fitted into this little stereo file so beautifully. Now, this guy, Cody, is an absolutely amazingly talented composer. He manages to not only develop the cues in an incredible way so that they feel natural and they grow in a really organic way, but they also are so well mixed and mastered, which he does himself. So yes, I doff my hat to you, sir. Mixing is one thing, mastering is a completely other thing. Doing them both, as well as writing like that, it's just incredible. I'm so in awe of your skills, Cody. And the other thing you guys might know him for is his Facebook group that he set up called the Trailer Music Composers Support Group, which is a fantastic resource for any of you looking to get into trailer music, filled with composers, publishers, producers. They're all there, all bantering and giving each other value all the time. It's really, really cool. And I just want to say, I really enjoyed this podcast. Cody's such a nice guy, really humble, also really open about his work, which I love. I love when people share their, air quotes, secrets, and he does not hold back at all. This is pretty much a masterclass. I almost like want to chop it up and say, hey, this is a course from Cody, because it's so good. And I was sitting there thinking, I should be writing this down. I feel like I'm in the presence of somebody really great. But obviously I recorded it, so I didn't need to write it down. But that didn't stop me holding a pen. Anyway, I blabbered on far too much. Let's hear the master himself. I'd like to start things off officially with a silly question to loosen us into the vibe of the interview, because obviously, it's always a bit awkward doing interviews and things like that. So my question to you, so this is adapted from a previous question I like to ask people, which would be normally, if you were a vegetable, what vegetable would you be? You don't have to answer that just yet.
Okay.
Because the question is actually now, specifically for this, if you were an instrument, what instrument would you be and why?
Okay. It's a very good question.
Thank you.
The one my mind naturally goes to, I'll go off my first instinct on this one. And I guess maybe it also has something to do with the fact that I grew up playing this instrument. I'll go with the trumpet.
Nice.
Because that was really my first, taste of music, being a musician, playing the trumpet through like middle school and high school and college and doing all the marching band thing. But trumpet, can be very, very soft and delicate. It's an intimate instrument, very emotional, but it can also be extremely bold and in your face and harsh. And so it has a wide range. And I think it's a good thing to be able to have a wide range, and just as a person, being able to be like an outgoing person, but at the same time be okay during social isolation and have no problem spending time to yourself. But being able to still be around people, I don't know. I don't know. I just think the trumpet's a really interesting instrument. And it has a wide range of emotions that it's able to express as an instrument, as opposed to some instruments where they're maybe a little bit more static, so to speak.
So what you're saying is you're a guy who's in touch with his emotions.
There you go. Even though my wife would probably tell you absolutely not.
Yeah.
He was like,
She's going to say you're like a
anything
Korg.
but.
Yeah. Mate, amazing. Love that. Also, the thing I love about questions like that is how actually, like, if you just roll with it, you'd be surprised what kind of comes out.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of good you didn't send me these questions in advance, because I could have like rehearsed it. And
yeah, that's it. Yeah. Well, I'm a cello because I'm very useful and everyone loves me. And yeah, no, that was great. That wasn't my answer, by the way. You know what? I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, I'll save my answer for that. You know.
I don't know. I'm really kind of tempted to know what yours would have been.
I would say a violin.
Okay.
A similar thing to you. It's the first instrument I learned. I never learnt it to any standard past Twinkle Twinkle Little Star really until university, where I quickly tried to improve. But similar answer to yours. But the first thing that popped into my head was, you know, when it's in the right space, a violin is lovely to be around. It's got this lovely energy. It really pierces through. But when it's not handled well, it sounds horrible. So maybe that's speaking about my mood swings. I don't know.
There you go.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. No, I just love the violin, just because it's so versatile, and I think that's the same thing with the trumpet. You know, it's more versatile than I think it gets credit for, because everyone just assumes it's got these sort of list of articulations. But the way you can play it, you know, if you see a good fiddler, then it's like a completely different instrument.
Oh yeah. Totally.
So I think the idea of having lots of different hats, like a violin, is always a nice thing, I think. So yeah, there we go. That's my. I'm sure if I ask this question again, I'm going to answer differently because it depends on the mood I'm in, right? So here we go.
Yeah.
So Cody, tell everyone about yourself, a little bit about yourself, where you are now, and how you got there.
Okay. So my name's Cody, of course. I'm 33 years old. I started, as I mentioned just a moment ago, I started with the trumpet as my first part of my music education, which I won't go into all the details, but just kind of briefly covering over that. So like I started playing trumpet, I was in 6th grade, which I guess was probably like, I don't know, 10 or 11 years old. So before that, I wasn't really involved in music. 10 or 11 years old, got involved in the trumpet, played like middle school band, high school bands, and it became a really big, important part of my life. And so from there, I took my learnings of the trumpet and applied and self-taught the guitar. And I've never been like really good at the guitar, but it really helped having a background with music and being able to read music, and understanding notes and rhythms and stuff like that when I was teaching the guitar to myself. And so like in high school, I was kind of back and forth, you know, my whole life was pretty much either guitar or trumpet, you know, school band versus like being like in a rock band and whatnot. And then in college, I actually went on to study music, but I didn't just study music. I did a double major kind of program at the university I went to. So I did a major in business and a major in music.
Nice.
Which looking at a lot of the composers in our field, like I don't see too many of them that have both of something else. And honestly, the reason I did that may not sound as like everyone tells me it's smart that I did that, right? Because it's like, okay, being a composer is as much as being a businessman as it is being a composer, just like how a composer these days have to also be a producer as much as being a composer, and so on and so forth. But honestly, I did it because I did not expect to have a career in music. Maybe that's the pessimist in me, but I didn't know that I would be able to have a career in music at the time as an 18-year-old kid getting out of high school. So I studied business as a tried and true safe path that I knew I could, you know, build a career around eventually. But I also studied music. I didn't want to do a major minor. I wanted to do a major in music as well, because I did have a passion for music. And I guess I did hold out hope that maybe it could slide into some kind of career in the future as well. But with that having been said, I didn't study composition specifically. My music degree was technically general music. So I had to take all the theories and the music literatures and the music history classes and, you know, jazz and all that kind of stuff, as well as the performance-based classes, some kind of composition and orchestration classes. But I didn't go into the deep composition classes like, you know, true composition majors would, because I filled that time with business classes to do the other major.
Yep.
But I still got a good, well-rounded education. And when I graduated, I graduated in 2009, which in the United States was during what we call the Great Recession. And so I wasn't able to find a job. I looked and looked and looked, couldn't find a job. I live in Texas, right? Not in LA, not in New York, not these places that are more entertainment focused or more like artistic or Hollywood centered or anything like that. I live in Texas, where it's big business oil, it's medicine in Houston, and well, obviously oil in Houston as well. So I figured I'd probably go into like some kind of oil type field, but I couldn't find a job like that. And at the time I didn't really expect to turn a career in music. So I worked at an Apple store for like 4.5 years, which was actually
Apple
really
Genius?
perfect for me. My job title was an expert.
Oh, nice.
So I started just the regular, worker ant position.
Yep.
Then I was an expert for like 4 years, which was on the same pay grade as genius, but we didn't have the flashy title of being a genius. But so I did that for a while, but it was actually perfect for me because I got free Logic training, the internal Logic training that no one else got outside of Apple, right? I got access to all sorts of like online training programs. So really, I credit my time at Apple as really helping me to really learn and understand mixing, production, and Logic, because that's really where I got my training, was while I was there. So it may not have been the highest paying job in the world, but it gave me a whole lot more than what I was being paid at the time. And it really helped me turn a new leaf on my life eventually. After I left Apple, I actually left Apple at the start of 2014, which is the year I started my time working with production libraries for trailers. So I left there at the very beginning of 2014. I started working for an oil company. I finally got that oil job I was trying to get, but it was funny because as soon as I got it, I was already looking for my way out, So I started working there. It was great. And I was making much better money than I was at Apple, better to support my wife and whatnot. But about 2 or 3 months after working there, having a regular Monday through Friday schedule finally, instead of retail hours, and being able to work day hours just during the weekdays, have my weekends back and evenings back, I was able to really focus much more consistent, regular time on music. So like only 2 or 3 months after I started working with the oil company, I started working with my first publishing companies, which was C21FX, was actually the very first one, which was being supervised by Chris Bragg at the time. Now he's the owner of Ghostwriter, for those who know Ghostwriter.
Yep.
And then shortly after that, I started working with a brand new publishing company called Sub Pub Music, which now people know them as Colossal Trailer Music.
Yep.
Which is part of SPM Music Group, which SPM is Sub Pub Music, which they don't talk about that, but that's kind of like the hidden meaning of the.
Yeah, they own like
word.
3 or 4 libraries, don't they? SPM.
It's probably like 2 or 3 times that amount now.
Oh, is it really? Okay.
Yeah, there's a bunch because they have different libraries for different purposes. Like they have one library that's specifically just in partnership with BMG, so everything they write is being co-published by PMG, or either co-published or sub-published, one of those.
Yeah.
By BMG, and then they have different labels that perform different purposes. They have one just for customs, and one focused mostly on TV production. I just hit a key. I don't know if you hear that. So yeah, I started working for Colossal Sub Pub Music at the time, and then not so long after that, Really Slow Motion came along, and then Audio Machine. So I was kind of dipped my toes in a bunch of different waters at the time, just to see what felt right, and also I think when you're early, you kind of have to start working for a bunch of different publishing companies. It's not really too often that someone starts with one and just sticks with one and is devoted to that one, because you usually got to figure out what works best for you. And so I was working full time at this oil company, which was about an hour drive. So 8-hour work days plus an hour each way to drive. So 10 hours of my day, Monday through Friday, was zapped with that. So then I would spend my evenings and my weekends composing. And so it was a lot to do. But I was driven and dedicated and really wanted to make it work. So I did that for about 2.5 years or so. And then in June of 2016, I actually walked into my job one day, worked a half a day. The oil industry was like on a downtrend at that point. So a lot of people were losing their jobs. A lot of companies were going out of business. A lot of the locations for the company I worked for were closing down. So I worked a half a day that day, and they called me into the office and said, "Sorry, Cody, we're going to have to let you go. Here's a severance paycheck, and we're sorry, you don't deserve this and everything. But I was like really trying to hold back. I was like really wanting to just like jump up and cheer, because probably for about 6 months or so before that, I was really wanting to quit. And it was a big jump. It was a big leap to have to do. And I don't know if I would have been able to just reach the decision on my own, be brave enough to just say, okay, you know what, I'm going to walk away from this job. I'm going to walk away from the medical insurance that's provided for me by this job. I'm going to just go for it full time as a composer, even though I felt confident I could do it, because by that point, my incomes were pretty much equal, composing wise, compared to my day job. Not considering the fact that the day job also provided the insurance. So that's an extra expense once I would leave that. But still, incomes were comparable. So I felt like I could do it. But it's still a huge leap of faith to have to make that decision. So the decision was made for me, and I was laid off that day, and made it easy because I got to collect, the severance pay and everything, and it wasn't me having to make the decision. It was God's choice for me, or whatever you want to call it, to make it a full-time commitment. So I went full-time, and haven't looked back since. I've been doing it now for almost 4 years. Worked for probably about it's been over a dozen publishers I worked for now, 12, 13. And so I've had a lot of great experience within this industry. I love the trailer industry. I've done a little bit of composing within the TV side of things, but I always go back to trailers because it's the style of music I enjoy writing. I love the fast-paced kind of high adrenaline kind of world that we live in for trailer music. It's just really what I enjoy. Everyone's got what they are passionate about, what they enjoy, what they're interested in. For me, I was listening to trailer music back, 10 years ago for public release albums for fun. I didn't really listen to many popular music albums. I was listening to trailer music for years before I was even doing it part-time. So like, it wasn't just something I just stumbled into, in that extent. Like I had my sights set on the trailer world for a number of years before I was actually doing it. And so I really do very much enjoy it and love it. And these days, I'm working for still, a variety of publishing companies. I guess most people probably see me doing most of my work with Audio Machine. I do a bunch of customs with them, as well as being a part of their commercial releases, their industry releases, many of which also get public releases as well. And then here lately, I've been working with Elephant Music, which you know all too well.
Okay.
And from time to time, still do things like for Colossal trailer music, as well as Cavalry. I did some for really slow motion, actually not too terribly long ago. So still here and there, working for a variety of libraries, but for the most part, focusing in on 2 or 3 that I spend the bulk of my time with.
Having not heard your story, I just absolutely love how, when you're explaining it, obviously when you're living those things, like working at Apple Store, you're being laid off, when you're living those things, you don't really connect the dots, but you just telling it in that narrative, it just like everything makes sense. You get this job at Apple, all of a sudden you're getting this amazing training in Logic, training you so that you can further your composing, and then it's just amazing. And then as you say, you've got your sights on this, well, I want to write music. And it's actually, I have to say, like, the fact that you had comparable incomes working in this oil industry job and composing after 2 years?
Yeah, two and a half years.
Mate, that's amazing. I mean, that in itself is a huge achievement. Don't let me tell you how many years it took me to get anything sort of comparable with my writing. So that is massive. That after 3 years, you had a sustainable living, maybe from
right.
music.
I was able to sustain life. I pay I was able to support my mortgage. I had to take on my own medical insurance, which I pay it's like $1,200 a month. I have to pay for medical insurance.
That's huge.
That's more than my mortgage. I live in Houston, where I live in a suburb right outside of Houston, where the cost of living's nothing like what people would know, like in LA or California in general, or I don't know where it's like where you are, but like in London, it's pretty high. New York is like astronomical. Where I'm at, cost of living, I'm thankful, is really quite low. So it helped make it sustainable. If I lived somewhere else, it may not have been sustainable.
Yeah.
but yeah, I will clarify too that after the 2.5 years when I went full time, that income was it was entirely sync license income, because I actually hadn't even, when I went full time as a composer, I hadn't even yet got my first BMI paycheck.
Oh, wow. Well, I
so
suppose that makes sense actually, doesn't it, with library stuff?
Yeah, so I got my first one like a couple months after I went full time. So it took me 2.5 years or whatever since my first or my first published music came back around to a BMI payout. But and it wasn't much, of course, my first one. But so I was able to become full time just off of the synchronization license end of it, and then over time the royalty side has been able to kind of catch up and be an extra form of security, because the sync license money, you never know when you're getting another paycheck. Sometimes it could be, even if you get a big one, you may not see that money for a year or more. So,
yeah. Yes. Well, almost all of mine is my income is from syncs.
okay.
Yeah, I'm just blessed that I get quite a lot of syncs. I think that's the thing.
We do like a ridiculous amount of music too. So I've heard all the stories, so I know all too well that you crank them out, and it blows my mind the amount of output you're able to achieve. So
yeah, well, I do not mix or master. Well, I suppose I mix, but I mix to an extent. But yes, I do pride myself on my speed of working. But I think that's just because I try to do that so that I don't let the inner critic start to rip my music apart. So I'm like, okay, get this one out the door, out the door, out the door. So
I mean, that's really the way to do it, because it's really, really easy, especially someone who's like in the creative world in general. We rip our own stuff to shreds, right? So it's really easy to get into this trap of just overthinking it to the point where you cripple yourself and you can't really get past it, and you stare at a blank screen for a week.
Yeah.
I think a lot of composers and creatives have been there. I have too. So I think it's great if you just can maybe not force it out, maybe that's not the right word, but you stay consistent and regular and disciplined to get a regular output of music so that you're not backtracking yourself constantly.
Yes. Yeah. I think that was the thing. It's one of learned a lesson from sort of my previous years when I was part-time. So I worked as a part-time music teacher as my bread and butter. And I had like 1 or 2 days a week that was just for music. So I had this like really kind of rushed feeling on those days to put as much music out as possible, or at least good music. And I'd find myself spending the entire day basically just listening to the same song over and over. When you're going to, okay, I'll listen to it again, just see if it needs anything. And you listen to it and you go, I'll just check again, see if it needs anything. And then like you do,
never ending process at that point.
Yeah, exactly. And as soon as I became aware of that, I've realized I was wasting sort of 50% of my day basically just doing nothing. Like maybe tweaking 1 or 2 leading notes on the melody, maybe tweaking the synth here or there, but that's all I was doing. So yeah, I'd like to say I'd learned that lesson, and actually having children was really good because I want to be with my kids and spend time with them. So me and my wife sort of split our days. So I do sort of a couple of hours a day writing, and then we sort of take it in turns with the kids, which is awesome to be there with them. So
yeah. That's fantastic.
Right, I'm really glad we kind of naturally flowed into this, because it brings into my next question, which is like, walk us through your creative process.
Okay. So I guess it depends on the kind of project I'll be working on, but a lot of my tracks I work on are kind of like the bread and butter cello music tracks these days, which, kind of the hybrid orchestral kind of pieces where you have this big epic orchestral section, but it has to be supported with a lot of modernized components like synthesizers, various signature sound kind of components, the big larger than life kind of drums. And so the process for creating a track like that can be a little bit overwhelming because there's so much to do. It's like, where do you begin? For me, I find that I gravitate largely towards like creating sound design first. I want to have something that's really unique and sets it apart from other tracks, so that when an editor hears it, they'll be like, okay, yeah, that's something I can grab onto and can envision for this project I'm working on. So I really do try to come up with like that signature component first, or even just come up with some cool synth kind of sounds, whether it be just an interesting sounding pulse or some kind of synth, moving synth drone, or edgier kind of one shot kind of synth element. So once I come up with something that kind of maybe repeats to some extent, or you kind of start it as a one shot and then you maybe apply a filter and have it modulate and move throughout the whole piece, then I can kind of build a piece around that, incorporating additional elements like drums that layer with it, and what kind of rhythm is it going to follow, what kind of chord progression is going to sit behind it, and I kind of just build it from there. But really very much of what I do is starting with like that signature sound, kind of initial sound to capture your attention, and then go from there. So much trailer music can be like really repetitive, and a lot of tracks from one to the next can sound very much the same. So that's one reason why I go towards that line of composing, to make sure that I at least start off with something unique, so then from there I can build it out, maybe in the more traditional sense, but it still has that unique element that it holds it in place as being something maybe special, hopefully.
I love the idea of that process. That's you're essentially sketching, aren't you?
Right.
You're sketching using a signature sound or a basic element that is going to sort of tie the whole cue together.
Right.
Because I often I don't know whether you know, but I've got like some courses where I teach people how to do trailer music, and one of the things I often try to get them to do first is actually like sketch out the entire cue. Again, you either starting with hits or rises, or like say signature sounds or a pulse or something that kind of gets the shape of the track there.
Right.
Because then, as you say, from there, once you've got maybe the basic structure and a feeling of development through, like you say, either modulation or I don't know, dynamics or rhythm, you're essentially then orchestrating the idea. You're just filling it out.
Layering all the pieces with it and orchestrating it. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. How many strings can I get playing this same ostinato? So my question to you is, so once you've got your signature sound started, you've sculpted the track, you've started to fill out the parts.
Mm-hmm.
What is your approach when writing the string parts? I'm talking about the back end specifically, because there's no pun intended about your behind here, but your back ends sound huge. I mean, they sound enormous, and they've got the wonderful breadth of sound as well. You've got really it's a lot of synth stuff you've got that feels really close in your face, and then you've got these sort of huge booms at the back, and everything just feels really well placed in the sonic dimensions. I mean, how are you working that out?
Okay. So it can be a little bit tricky, but like when it comes to like working with the string parts, I try to keep all the strings having like the same reverb settings. I do like to use a lot of the UAD plugins, Universal Audio. The API Vision Strips, one plugin that I use pretty much on every orchestral section at least, like on my string bus, my brass bus. And
is that a
so I really love.
Is that a directional mixer?
It is. It's a channel strip. So it has like a gate. It has a compressor. It has an EQ, like a low pass or high pass filter, low pass filter. You can add gain and whatnot to saturate the sound a little bit more. So there's a lot you can do with it. So you can really push the input gain up, and pull the output gain down to kind of give it that extra little bite. If you want to give it that little push. Or you can just use the built-in API EQ, which has a really lovely sound. So if you really push some of the higher frequencies on it, it just makes one little dB push will make it cut through when maybe it wouldn't cut before. So it's a beautiful plugin. And kind of going along with that, there's the API 500 series EQ set, which has the 550 and 560 EQs. I use those a lot as well. If I just want specifically EQ and nothing else, no compressor or anything like that. And those as well they'll add a warmth, they'll add character to it, and they'll give like your short strings a nice bite if you boost in the right frequencies. kind of that mid to upper mid frequencies to kind of give it that little, it's kind of allowed to cut through the mix better. So I use that a lot. Reverb, a lot of automating reverb when it comes to like the ends of sections. So if you come to a point where the track is going to break, have the reverb automate upwards so that it has a longer decay at that point, so it really rings out, but automate it back down when everything comes back in, so it's not just a bunch of reverb mush, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of those little tricks to create a sense of depth, because when you have that big impact and everything's ringing out afterwards, it gives you that sense of like, whoa, this is huge. But really, you just brought that depth of sound and that reverb in for the moment where you really notice it, and then you suck it back away once everything else comes back in. A lot of cutting of instruments. If it's not playing anything low, cut the low. You know, even if it is playing something low, a lot of times cut the low, because you want to make room for the drums. They have to be able to cut through, or low synths, or really especially the drums for trailer music. You need that to have power and punch. And if you have these super beefy low strings and synths and everything down in there, it's going to really eat into that. So it might sound a lot bigger and better by cutting out the lower, bigger parts of a lot of sections that don't necessarily need to have it, even though it may sound contradictory. If you get too much going on in that low area, it's going to go to mush really quickly. And then I use the Valhalla reverb mostly these days, which is actually a really great reverb plugin. And I use that to get a lot of the depth that I get, because I play around with that depth setting on different instrument sections, and synth sections or piano or percussion or whatever, and I'll have different depths and different decay times depending on the different sections that are playing. So it's not just everything going through one room, which a lot of people want to have everything going through the same space so that it sounds uniform, sounds convincing as like a live performance. But we're doing trailer music. It doesn't, like, trailer music isn't a live performance. It's not right. A live orchestra is never going to sound to the same like energy level and power as like trailer music does. We're not going for realism necessarily. We're going for over the top. So utilizing differing reverb settings in that sense to have differing like levels of depth for different sections will allow you to kind of get everything separated out to some extent if everything's in one space. So like if you had 100 players sitting in the middle of one stage, well, you know, it's not going to really sound right. The whole point of a stage is the players can all be spread out and take up the whole stage. Well, I use kind of depth and panning in that sense so that I can spread everything out so it's not just condensed in one little spot where everything's playing together, but it sounds more like everything is spread out much more, and gives you that depth. In my mastering, I really love this one plugin. I can't remember. I'm horrible with names of things, so
you're doing pretty well so far.
But the UAD Chandler Limited Curve Bender EQ is really great. It's a mid-side. You can kind of achieve this with any kind of mid-side EQ, but the Curve Bender is a good one. And essentially, you can use it to boost the frequencies of the higher frequencies, but only on the sides. And by boosting the highs on the sides and not boosting the highs in the mids, will allow it to create that sense of extreme width and make it feel much larger and bigger. Just by turning that plug-in on, you'll hear an instant difference with those boosts in the highs on the sides. And then, you know, conversely, you'll do things like boost the lows perhaps on just the mids, and maybe even reduce or eliminate a lot of the lows on the sides, because you really want to confine the low mids, the low mids, especially the lows, for like straight up the center of your spectrum. And then the highs will be where it creates that massive sense of depth, and together it forms, you know, a huge amount of power. For brass, same kind of thing as the strings. I like to put a lot of well, not a lot. I usually don't put very much compression on either the strings or the brass. I really like to keep those rather organic in that sense. But using EQ to boost certain frequencies to really make them cut through and sound more powerful, especially like in the mids, upper mids, being kind of strategic about where I place it. And I can't really tell you always put it right here at this point, because it depends on the track, right? You know, a great plugin is the Fat Filter Pro L or Pro Q. Sorry, the EQ from Fat Filter.
Yeah.
Because you can actually have like a brass bus and string bus together. Insert that EQ on the string bus. Insert another instance of that EQ, the Fat Filter Pro Q3, on the brass bus. Play them both at the same time, and one of those EQ instances will tell you where those two instruments are conflicting. It'll indicate a little red. It'll highlight red where the frequencies are overlapping, and that right there can tell you, okay, well, maybe I should boost the strings a little bit here, but cut the brass a little bit there, so that they're not fighting against each other, but they're working more cohesively together. Because mixing is really about how do I make it all work together, as opposed to how do I make the strings stand out more. Well, you can't just slap a bunch of effects on the strings, because then they're just gonna maybe overpower everything else. It's not about that so much as it is making everything gel together. And using EQ is a very strategic way of doing that. And then I usually reserve my use of compression more for the drums, where I will definitely heavily go in on the compressors for that, to give it a lot of bite and attack and power. Trying to focus on using as minimal amounts of low instruments in the drums as possible. Focus on one or two that are like your bread and butter low, and then everything else needs to be like more of your mids and your highs, to fill out the sound. You want your drums to be more of the boom, the thump, the
smack,
crackle, the sizzle.
Yeah, the sizzle. Yeah, that's right.
So if you kind of break it down in that sense, you want most of your focus in layering to be in the upper end of all that. Really get beefy low drums, but don't layer a whole bunch of, and then cut the low out of everything else that has low in there too. Cut it. Just cut all of it. Cut everything below 100 or 200 hertz. If it's a mid drum or a high drum, just cut all that low, so you can make room for that low drum to really shine through. I don't know if I'm just going off on a tangent. I could probably talk about this stuff for hours.
I think what you've just supplied the listeners is a masterclass.
So
there you go.
Yeah. But then there's a lot to be said about just good writing too. The best written tracks I find usually don't really require nearly as much work on the back end of trying to correct it with mixing. So if you have a good background in orchestration and know how to use the instruments the way they're supposed to be used, if you know like which ranges cello works best with, which ranges the violin works best, which ranges the trumpet works best, and the French horn, and so on and so forth, a well-written track will kind of mix itself to a point. And then you can just use the plugins to kind of sweeten it, or in the case of trailer music, take it over the edge, push it beyond what's natural, but still sounds good.
Yeah. Some amazing tips in there. I want to just pick up on that last one you talked about, where like a well-written track like is easier to mix. The thing I kind of want to disagree with you. I want to agree. I want to agree completely, because I do agree. Because actually, when you're orchestrating it well, you're layering the frequencies to the point where there's nothing conflicting. So you're essentially just allowing the mix to sit and do what it needs to do, because everything is producing the goods.
Right.
With trailer music, it's not like we're just sat in front of an orchestra.
Right.
Because you'll have all of your strings and brass and percussion doing their jobs beautifully, and then you throw on a massive riser, which is immediately conflicting with those guys.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And
you don't have a riser player sitting up on stage.
Exactly.
So, obviously that's not realistic.
No, exactly. That's like a second orchestra all just doing risers in the back of the room. And then, you've got all of these other instruments that all of a sudden make that sort of classical orchestrating like a completely different ball game. And that's why it's really interesting what you were saying about using the reverbs to then place things in different spaces.
Yeah.
I always love the trailer music for the fact that it feels like you're not just listening to a band in a room, you're not just listening to an orchestra in a hall. It feels like you're listening to an orchestra on a moon, or in a massive battlefield. There's like huge drums in the distance. There's a choir over up on that cliff top there. There's some guy with a violin stood right in front of you, like scratching it to death. And there's all these different sounds in these different settings. And that's what your mixes do so well. They put all these, what would essentially kind of fight conflicting sounds
Hmm.
They put them into this lovely world, giants jumping around in the background, angels singing in the skies, planes crashing and booming, and that's what you get from your tracks. Well, that's what I get anyway. I think that's why your tracks are so placeable, especially with the big films, because they have that sense of scale and
Right.
gravitas, which is awesome. And hearing you explain that process is just like, well, of course that makes sense now. Yeah, it's great, man. I want to ask you. So, what as a trailer composer, what's creative barriers do you think we face, like on a day-to-day basis?
Oh, yeah. And that's a big one. Because trailer music is, I think a lot of people maybe who don't know trailer music very well, or those who have kind of dipped their toes into it. I think a lot of people have this predisposed idea that trailer music just all sounds the same, and to some extent they're actually kind of right. A lot of the chord progressions from one track to the next, they might follow the same chord progressions. You go to that, you have that one chord, then you go to like the lower sixth chord, and then it's just all the.
Yep.
It is very much. There are certain tropes, I guess, that are consistent in the trailer world from one piece of music to the next. So one struggle that I have, and I think all trailer composers do at some point, is how do I make my next track stand out from the last one I did, when the language of trailers is very much focused around that expected kind of chord progression, and in a lot of ways, the weird chord progressions are the more unique ones, are the ones that don't place. The ones that you see in the next Marvel trailer or the next DC trailer or whatever, they're going to use those same chord progressions that you've heard dozens and hundreds of times.
Yeah.
So what works, but at the same time, you don't want to have to just use the same musical language 1,000 times. You want to be creative and be able to express your creativity and come up with something new and different. So kind of what I started with in this interview was talking about how I use sound design to make tracks stand out. And that's one thing I do to help kind of make up for the fact that the musical language may not be anything radical compared to the rest of the music going out to the trailer world. But I try to make the sound design, make it stand out to some extent. Oh, there goes that. Whatever that is again. So I try to make the track stand out by focusing on elements that will make it unique and make it stand out. And then if the track does follow kind of a more expected musical language from a harmonic perspective, then the track still is unique and still memorable without being too radical and too different that it doesn't work for trailers. So it's kind of a weird slippery slope you have to fight. You have to find something that's comfortable, or not comfortable, but that fits the scope of trailers. And that one thing that Mark Petrie always talks about is having the authenticity of trailers, right? Having that authentic trailer sound. And I think having a certain harmonic language kind of automatically sets you up for that authenticity, because if you go too extreme with chord progressions, it's going to be too weird that, like they don't want John Williams kind of stuff in trailers, unless if it's like a Star Wars trailer or whatever, or something really fantasy driven. They want something that's simplistic, but not simplistic, right? So it's simplistic from a musical perspective. It's not going to have any more than 3 or 4 chords, but it's going to be complex in many of the other ways that the track is composed. So whether that be from instrumentation or the sound design or some kind of production technique, using some kind of cool parallel compression or sidechain compression to create some cool, interesting, weird effect or something. There's a lot of things you can do to kind of make up for the fact that the harmonic language isn't going to be anything that's breaking barriers. You know what I mean?
See, I love that you brought this up, because I get the feeling that this is the creative barrier that almost every trailer composer has, especially working with, like you say, the hybrid orchestral, the blockbuster trailer sound. I mean, I'm kind of blessed in that my niche is thrillers and horrors. So although I've dabbled in the bigger blockbuster stuff, I don't even often have to worry about chord progressions anymore. So
That's true. A lot of the thriller stuff just kind of stays on one note
Oh yes.
the whole way through.
Yeah, so I'm thinking how I'm going to make A sound good this time. So yeah, but that is also for me one of the saving graces of trailer music, because I actually think it's the huge limitations and the really obvious formulas that make it exciting. And I think that's when you really have to bring out the creativity, because rather than kind of thinking to yourself, oh, like, when I used to do songwriting, I'd be thinking I've got to come up with a really original chord progression, and I've got to come up with a really cool original riff, and I've got to come and everything had to be original.
Yeah.
But with trailer music, we're all going to be using the same drum rhythm, we're all going to be using the same chord progression, we're probably all using the same ostinatos in our strings as well. So what can we play around with? And it's that thing you say, sculpting sound is one of the things that I think excites me most about trailer music. Taking the sound of a violin, recording it, and then smashing it to death, and then seeing what you get. And all of us,
make it sound nothing like a violin, and you'd be like, wow, that's actually kind of cool.
Yes.
And it's something that is unique. It is something that's you now, but you just started with the violin sample, so absolutely. Yeah, I'm a huge fan for that. There's actually one of my early placements. It wasn't really a full trailer placement. It was when I was first getting started, and Captain America: Civil War had just released their first trailer, and I did this track where I made these transitional elements using a French horn. It was just like a French horn crescendo, but I layered like some kind of weird distortion and compression. I can't remember what all I did to it, but I made it sound like this weird kind of transforming kind of wow kind of thing. But it started as a French horn sound, and I sit there and I watch this trailer, and there's a point after the first act of the trailer where it's going into the second act, and then I hear my sound come in. Wow. It's like, hey, that was my little French horn sample, but no one in the world would know that was a French horn, right? And that was actually the only thing I had in that trailer, right? It was a 3-second little transitional element, but that was an example where I made something I thought it sounded pretty cool, but it wasn't instruments. French horn instrument, everyone knows a French horn. Everyone could probably pick out the sound of a French horn, but you would never know it was a French horn to start with. And so there's a lot of things you can do with just your samples and messing around with some modulation type plugins to come up with something weird and unique or cool or catchy or something that hooks you in,
Mate, I couldn't agree more. And actually, it's quite funny because I got two TV spots for Captain America: Civil War, and similar thing. Like it was a single boom I got placed at the beginning of the trailers, and it was just like winning. again, it was some ethnic flute that I just detuned and shoved through some compression and distortion, so it sounded all mangled and weird, and it had that stuff. It set the tone for the trailer. And
and it just works. And it was something that was just you too. It was unique. It wasn't just like a Bram sample library patch preset that the editors have already heard 30 times from all the other music they've been submitted. It was something different and new, so they felt compelled to use it.
Absolutely.
In your case, with that Bram flute.
Yeah.
Never heard of a Bram flute before.
Like, you'd be surprised what you can make rhymes out of,
Sure.
Okay, now this one is I really like this last question. Before we get onto the quickfire round, is I think because I'm often thinking back to myself, and actually this is why I'm doing these podcasts. I'm not, I sound like an egotist when I say that. I'm not often thinking about myself. I'm often thinking about like the me that was starting out. The me that started out would have loved a podcast like this, where I could get to hear guys like you talking about your process. Amazing. And the me that started out would have loved trailer courses, because when I started out, there were none.
Right.
And so my question to you is, what advice, I'm going to say to people, but actually what I mean is, what advice would you have for yourself or for anyone who would be aspiring to become a trailer composer? What advice would you give to your former self? I'm saying.
What advice?
Stay the path.
Stay the path. Come to the dark side.
Yeah.
Well, I wish someone had given me this advice long before, I was doing this. I felt like I waited a little bit late in life to get started. I was like 20, I don't know, 26 or something. I'm not old or anything by any means, but I know a lot of guys who are working and getting trailers when they're like 18,
Mm-hmm.
and I really wish that I had started much younger, and just went for it much younger and early on in my life, so that I could have, where I'm at now, maybe where I would have been like 8-10 years ago, and where I'm at now could be like, I could be way beyond where I am at this point in my career if I had started much younger. So my advice would be, don't wait. Get started, get doing this as early as you can, even if you are still in college. Actually, a good friend of mine, Jordan Reese, he's a composer, trailers, working in, he went to school in London, but he's from Wales. He lives in Wales. He was making trailer music and getting trailer licenses while he was still in college and doing both at the same time. And I admired him for that. And when I first met him online, I was like, dude, you got to be like, what, like 25, 26? He's like, no, I'm 18. I'm like, what? You just like got a trailer and, just starting at school and just starting at university and everything. It just kind of blew my mind. So I really wish I had started young. And if I would give anyone the advice, start young, figure it out early on, so that way you don't have to figure it out later on. And then your career will thank you. Because as we talked about earlier, it can take many years to kind of get a consistent revenue stream going as a composer. And you don't want to be like out of college and then you're figuring out, okay, how do I start making money doing this? How do I start, trying to build a career out of this? By that point, it's not too late, but it's going to make it much harder for you to be able to do that without having to get another job to help sustain you first. So I guess that's one piece of advice I would give myself.
That's
trying to think
good
if there's something else. If there's something else I would.
Can I add something to that piece of advice?
Yeah.
It's like an extension of that, because I think those of us who are on the creative path have had a little voice at the back of our mind for a very, very long time saying, I want to write music.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is basically, don't ignore that guy. You've got to pay attention to that little voice. That's whether you want to call it a higher soul, your purpose, whatever it is, that's the thing you need to listen to.
Yeah. You basically elegantly summed up what I was trying to say, but you made it so,
well, thank you,
so elegant. So that's actually, yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. Listen to that voice. And if you feel that pull and you feel that calling to do it, just start doing it. Well, don't keep telling yourself, I have to wait until I have this sample library to be able to go for it, or I have this amount of education to be able to go for it. Honestly, some of the best composers out there have like no music education at all. Look at Hans Zimmer.
Yeah,
he has like no music, like university level training or anything like that, but yet he's probably the most recognizable film composer out there, besides maybe like John Williams or something. But so you don't need to wait for things to happen. Just start writing, start composing. Use your compose from the heart and do what you like to do. Don't try to compose a certain style because that's the end thing. There'll reach a point where you have to do that. But when you're first starting out, focus on what you enjoy and what you're best at, because that's going to be what you do better than anything else that you would be able to do, I feel. The thing that I'm passionate about is the thing I'm going to be best at. I may still be able to do other things. I may still be able to develop a better skill for other styles, as I've been forced to do as a trailer composer. I've had to trailerize pop songs and hip hop songs and all sorts of kind of obscure things. I've had to do remakes of like operatic kind of pieces, and do my best to isolate the vocals from like the original Pavarotti recordings and stuff. I've had to do some like kind of obscure things, but the thing that I'm always going to be best at is what drew me in to like wanting to listen to trailer music in the first place, which maybe not everyone wants to listen to trailer music. I'm the oddball maybe there, but I was really drawn to that, just that big, epic, huge, larger than life sound that, we were getting like around, like 10 years ago when Thomas Burgerson was like one of the only publicly available trailer composers that had music that you could just go on iTunes and buy. I was buying up all his stuff and I was listening to it day in and day out. And, that was like a fire in my belly to be like, I want to be like him. I want to do like him. And I'm going to do my best to get to that level. And even if I don't get to that level, if I could get at least to this level, you know, maybe
Yeah.
that's still good enough. But there's nothing stopping you from starting as soon as you realize you have that passion for it.
I could not have put it any better than that. Well said, sir. And
Well,
also,
thank you, sir.
I liked the emphasis on enjoyment as well, because
Yes.
if you don't have the enjoyment, you will quickly lose the drive. So you must do the stuff that you enjoy.
Yeah, it's there are people who enjoy accounting and enjoy engineering and enjoy being doctors and nurses,
Mm-hmm.
and those are the jobs that are perfect for them, and that's how they go to work, and the time just is gone, and they get to go home, and it didn't even feel like they were gone all day. If music is that passion for you, you need to cultivate that and go for it early on, and don't shy away from it, because regret is, I've been fortunate not to have to really experience like regret, but so it's told. Regret, if you look back in your life and realize, I wish I had done that, I wish I had gone for it and didn't, you're gonna regret it then, wondering what would have happened if I just went for it, if I just tried, if I just gave it my best. Don't let fear stop you. It all comes down to fear in that sense. So much of the creative obstacle is fear, and if you shove that fear aside, if you just let your love and passion for the music and the art come through, then the fear has no place.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. End the podcast now. Mate, that's beautiful. Also, again, I love the fact that you talk about fear. So much. I think it's such a shame that in the music industry, there isn't enough talk about mindset. Especially when you're guys like us whose work is at a desk on your own. You need to stay on top of yourself. You got to make sure you're looking after yourself, focusing on what you enjoy, and not listening to those fearful voices that are either coming in there or from around you.
Yeah.
Just
and I mean, the trailer world can be very difficult to cope with in that regard, because fear comes from like the fear of rejection, right? And the competition in trailers is fierce. If you go for like the next, Avatar is going to be coming out at some point. If you go for an Avatar trailer, you better be willing to bet that there's going to be hundreds of other composers who are pitching for it, tons of trailer houses who are creating trailers to compete with other trailers, to compete with other cuts and other cuts. And there's going to be dozens of cuts created with dozens, if not hundreds of different options of music available. And, really only one person's going to get the main music, or if they split up to where like there's a first half and second half main music, only a handful of people are going to be able to say in the end, they got, the teaser trailer for Avatar or whatever. But that doesn't take away from the fact that the 200 composers who, busted their butts trying to create something amazing for it, doesn't take away from the fact that they perhaps actually did create something truly amazing for it. So the rejection isn't something that you have to let affect you, but in a sense, you learn from it and you allow that to help you to grow, and apply what you learned to that project to the next project, because you have to get used to the fact that you're going to lose most of the time. Even if you perform perfectly, you could do the perfect track that everyone listened to it is brought to tears, right? But that doesn't mean you're going to land the trailer still. The perfect track still may not land, but 5% of the time in the theatrical trailer pitch. And what actually lands may be something you watch the trailer and you're like, that was an odd choice, or it may not, it's not bad, but there's just so many different creative minds involved in the process of creating a trailer. The people in the trailer house, not kind of the people in the music publishing side of things, but the trailer house, the editors, the music supervisors, the producers, and everyone involved in the actual movie studios themselves. And then if it goes up high enough, of course, it'll involve directors and things like that as well. There's a lot of places where a trailer can get chopped down and that rejection can immediately hit you. But actually, it won't immediately hit you, because you won't ever find out you didn't get it until
it
until the trailer comes out.
Yeah.
So it's a weird industry in that regard, and rejection is something you deal with the majority of the time. But you have to stick to it. You have to continue writing, and whatever you don't land in that trailer, that music could still be generic enough that it could go into an album and then get released under an album with that publisher to then be used in a different trailer, which has happened to probably most of the trailer composers numerous times, I would imagine. It's happened to me a few times. So rejection is not always a bad thing, because it can lead to greater opportunity later on. So I don't know, I feel like a motivational speaker.
Mate, I'm loving it. No, it's great.
Channeling my inner motivational speaker.
Yeah, that's it, dude. You should start standing up and, pacing around.
It's all the antibiotics I've been on, man. All the antibiotics to treat this
really
laryngitis-induced staph infection, I guess.
Oh, mate, I'm sorry. You should go start drinking as well. Really, really fire up. Get some beers, antibiotics. That works, right?
I think water will work well for me right now.
Love that. And actually, it's funny you say that, because actually, like, I found the rejection of customs very hard to deal with in my the first time I started, because actually when I first got into trailer music, I quickly got onto one of the final cuts for 2 huge Hollywood films. It was the first Star Trek remake. No, the second Star Trek remake. What's it called?
Into Darkness?
Into Darkness.
Yeah.
No, is that the third one? Well, anyway, the second one.
I think Into Darkness was the second one.
Yeah, Into Darkness, yeah. And Man of Steel. So I'd barely been in trailers at all, like maybe a few months. I suddenly got into these cuts. I thought, oh my gosh, my life is going to turn around. I was still part-time teaching at the time. I was like, I've made it. This is amazing. And then the trailers come out and I'm like, hold on. Wait, this isn't my music. And then it dawned on me that I didn't get the trailer. And that really like hit me hard the first time.
A lot of composers don't realize how steep that slope is to be able to land a trailer, how many obstacles there are.
Yeah.
And you think you're told a lot of positive information, like, oh yeah, the editors loved it, the supervisors loved it, the producers then loved it. We even heard the director liked it, but then the trailer comes out and it's not yours, and you're kind of like, what gives? Everyone liked it. Why didn't they use it?
Yeah, because the film director saw it and had a sudden change of heart. So yeah, I mean, so many reasons why I didn't make it, but that was a real like blow to the gut. And actually, that's I don't really do customs anymore, because I prefer to, because again, customs are quite demanding.
They are, yeah.
Especially because I'm in the London time zone. It's kind of like, as we're sort of winding down to our evenings, LA wakes up and goes, "Hey, work for us." So you go, "Oh no, okay, I've got to do work in the evening too," and then they'll be like, "We need this for tomorrow," and then you'll work during the day, and then I mean, it can be quite grueling. So yeah, I mean, my preferred way of working is production music, essentially. And perhaps there'll be a whisper of a trailer that then I demo something that then gets sent in an early cut, but it's not an official custom. It's like
it's something that's just unreleased that would be on an album. Yeah.
Exactly. And that way I keep my fragile ego safe, but anyway, I think what we're going to do now, I'm aware of the time. Let's go to the quick fire round.
All right. Let's do it.
You ready for this? This serious.
I hope I'm ready for this. I'm a little intimidated now. Hearing about this quick fire round.
Mate, they're all super easy questions. Okay, firstly, what's your DAW?
Logic Pro 10.
Cashback. Yay. Go Team Logic. What is your
go? While I was working at Apple, so
really?
Score.
Amazing. So what's your go-to piano library?
I like the one called Emotional Piano, which is I forget who made that one all the time. Is it, what, Sound Iron?
It's not released anymore, is it? Emotional Piano, or is it?
Well, it used to be Tone Hammer years ago.
That's it. Yeah.
But Sound Iron picked it up. Yeah, you can get it today on Sound Iron.
Oh, there we go.
So I use that one, and then I actually like a lot of the Native Instruments ones too, like the Gentleman and the Grandeur and the Maverick. So I use some of the Native Instruments ones as well, but I usually tend to gravitate first towards the emotional piano.
Nice. Go-to string library.
For just kind of bread and butter strings, I'll use Cinematic Studio Strings for longs and maybe for shorts. but usually I'll gravitate to also adding a layer of LA scoring strings. I just have the Last Light version. I don't have the full Last, but Last Light has all this staccato and spiccato articulations. So I really love, even though they're not exactly new, they've been around for many, many years. I still consider them to be like one of the best, if not the best, short articulation libraries in the market. And then for the long articulation, like your legatos and stuff, I'll use the Cinematic Studio strings.
Nice.
And then maybe a layer of Cinematic Studio solo strings sitting on top of Cinematic Studio strings to give you like that first chair feel, just kind of give it a little bit of extra lift.
That extra emotion.
Exactly.
Go-to brass library.
I don't have one. I always use a mixture of Hollywood brass and oldie but a goodie. I find the French horn is still really, really good for cutting through.
I was going to say they cut through, don't they?
There are meatier sounding French horns available. Like I also use the Metropolis Arc 1 brass, which the low brass on it is amazing. It's awesome. And then the French horn and the trumpet too sound really good as well. But the low brass and Metropolis Arc is like to die for. So I really love the low brass because they have an actual like cimbasso, and they have bass trombones and
tubas. Yep.
Yeah. So all that layered together, you get like a really meaty low brass sound. And then the Metropolis French horn layered with perhaps the Hollywood brass French horn works really, really well. And I do have Berlin brass as well. I like the trumpet in Berlin brass. That's my favorite trumpet. So I don't have a one library fits all. Favorite brass is a combination of Metropolis Arc, Hollywood brass, trumpet, Berlin brass. Low brass would be Metropolis Arc.
In style with your music, it's a hybrid library you're creating.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm sure your answer for this next one is going to be similar then. Go to percussion. And when I'm saying percussion, I'm not talking about like big trailer one hits. I'm talking about, your go-to drums basically.
Yeah. So for that, as cliched as it may sound, Damage is still really good. Even though it is, again, a little bit older. It's a great library for not the loops part of it, and not the impacts that have like the trail off the tail part of it. A lot of those are, the moment you hear it, you've heard it a billion times. But like just the core drum parts of that library, really, really good. The Metropolis Arc percussion, you got some really meaty low drums, which works great. The Albion drums too can be really good for that same kind of purpose, the low meaty kind of drums. And then I also like to layer non-organic kind of percussion instruments with the more organic sounding drums too. So I like to layer a lot of like hit kind of sounds that aren't necessarily drums, but like yeah. So like AVA Instinct is a really good kind of like sound design library, and they have some really good sounding hits in there that I like to use for a drum layer. Even like Project Alpha, Project Bravo have some good hits that work as a drum layer. And then more recently, a newer one is by a company called Pulsetter. Pulsetter Sounds. They have a product called Detonator Rage, which has some really, really awesome like punchy hits that work really well as give you that snap and that punch on your drums as a layer.
There's a setting on there that's it's essentially they're like huge one shots, but there's one I can't remember which one it is, but there's one that's just like, yes, this is the money. This is the money.
This is it.
Okay, go to synth.
If I had to pick one, I would pick Omnisphere. It's incredibly versatile. It has a large sample-based kind of library within it that can also be mangled within the synthesizer engine, as well as being able to synthesize using all form, like using the orb. You can do some weird, wacky stuff, and you can do some crazy stuff with that synthesizer. Even though I've had it for years and years and years, anytime I sit down with it, I can come up with something that I haven't heard before. And so I find that makes it really special. So Omnisphere, without a doubt. Bunch of really other bunch of really good synths that are also out there. Like I really like Diva and Zebra. What's that one called? Serum is a pretty amazing wavetable synth. Even like a lot of the Native Instruments ones are really quite good. But Atmosphere, if I had to pick like a desert island synth, it would be Atmosphere.
I nod in agreement, by the way. Yes.
Okay. What would yours be?
Atmosphere, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, in agreement. Yeah. In fact, actually.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, no, sorry. Nod.
Nod.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, your percussion list was the same as mine, as was your brass list.
Okay.
So okay. And top 3 effects plugins. I feel like you've already said this in your wonderful creative
like
process.
Mixing or like creative effects, or both.
Well, seeing as you've already kind of given us your mixing effects in earlier on, let's go for creative effects, because actually, given that your first point of contact is often your signature sound, I can imagine the creative effects are pretty important there.
For sure. First off, if you don't have sound toys, just go buy the bundle right now. You won't regret it. Or if you don't want to buy it right now, wait till they do a sale, because they usually do like a 50% off sale or something. You can get it for like, I think $299 or something US dollars.
That's $299. $299.
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
I think it's $299. Yeah.
$2.99. Yeah.
Oh, I meant $299. I think the regular price is like $500 or something.
Yeah.
So if you don't have it, either buy it when it's $299, or even if you bought it at $500, it's well worth it.
Yeah.
But I use the heck out of pretty much all of them. The Decapitator is a great saturation kind of distortion plugin. Panman is awesome for creating that back and forth panning kind of modulating effects. Tremulator is super cool for creating stuttery effects and other kind of. And if you layer them all together, you can come up with some really cool and unique sounds that are really weird. Little Alter Boy pitch bending and adjusting and layering it with the original sound, adding some distortion to it. Just awesome stuff. So sound toys, I don't know if I could.
Yeah, of course.
Just put it all in one. Just one.
The sound toys plugin. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Sound toys. Yeah.
The little plate on sound toys is a phenomenal reverb too.
It is. Yeah, I remember when it first came out, and just mind blown.
Yeah,
it sounds amazing.
It's so good because it doesn't have any color. It doesn't color it to like a specific sound. You're just like, this is just like reverb. Yes.
Right. Let's see. There's Eventide. They have a reverb called Mangled Verb, which isn't really like your normal reverb. It's kind of like a reverb. It's like super like kind of sci-fi focused. You can get some really weird, kind of interesting results in reverb tails. So I like to use Mangled Verb quite a bit. So I guess I'd maybe count that as one. Really, really great plugin. It kind of piggybacks off of Black Hole in a way. A lot of people are familiar with Black Hole, but maybe not as familiar with like Mangled Verb. Black Hole is more of like it's more traditional for reverb, but still not traditional in the sense that it's like super long, spacey tails. But Mangled Verb, you can get some really cool, unique, kind of weird effects. Xfer, the company that makes Serum, I use that's called Lfo Tool. It like adds an extra LFO basically to whatever signal is going through it. So you can add choppy effects. You can make it modulate and pitch adjust and do things like in real time, like in a step sequencer kind of manner.
That's cool.
Which is a really cool plugin. There's another one called Glitch. I think Glitch 2 is the latest version. I'm trying to think of who made that one. But Glitch is I use it probably more than I do the Xfer one, the Lfo Tool. But both of them are can be used in a similar fashion. Kind of a step sequencer, kind of modulation, processing effect plugin. It has built-in delay and modulation and tremulating kind of thing, gate kind of plugin effects. So it's kind of like an all-in-one, but you can process it over, again, like a step sequenced kind of sequence, a sequenced strand of beats. So you can have that not just a gate that plays straight on for forever, but it only affects the first and the third beat of the measure or however you program it. One that I use a whole lot, I use the Waves IM pusher, which is something I use kind of in conjunction with, or instead of sometimes FabFilter Saturn. So Saturn is a really good kind of saturation plugin, multiband saturator, which you can really use to give synths like that edge and that bite. And then the IM pusher, though, can be used in a similar fashion, even though it's not a multi-band saturator. It's kind of like what you would expect Ozone to do to your master bus, but kind of more focused for individualized instruments to really slam it and smash, give you cool, meaty, girthy sounds.
Awesome. I can't have enough of those plugins.
For sure.
Yeah. One of my favorite ones is PSP Vintage Warmer. Just I can't get enough of that plugin. I like, you just put that on any bus and you're just like, yes.
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 That's the one.
Yeah, that's it. I'm not even touching anything. I'm just loading it. Okay, and now what's your number one piece of advice to write better trailer music?
Okay, that one's easy. Number one piece of advice is to listen to trailer music. I know so many composers who write to me, or even friends who are local, like, how do I get into trailer music? I want to do trailer music. And they're not familiar with any of the trailer music publishing companies. They haven't heard of, if I mention a bunch of publishing names like Audio Machine or Elephant, or if I give them a list of like 20 names, they wouldn't have heard of any of them. And they're just not kind of up to date with what's out there from the trailer music side of things. They don't know what trailer music sounds like, quite simply put. To be able to write it, you got to know what it sounds like. To be authentic trailer music, you have to know what authentic trailer music is. So my best advice is to listen to trailer music, study it, watch every trailer that you can that comes out, keep up with the trends, because trailer music doesn't just stay the same all the time. New trailers will come out, and the style of music that's used and the way music is used in the trailers will fluctuate over time. So keep up with those trends, keep up with the latest publishing companies that are releasing music, study their music, study the composers, and just listen to it. It's pretty much what it comes down to. And the more you can get that sound ingrained into your head by just simply listening, sort of like ear training. In college, you study ear training, and the hope is that you'll eventually be able to develop maybe not perfect pitch, but really, really good relative pitch, right? You can't just unlock that ability like that. You don't just wake up one morning and you've got really good relative pitch. It takes years of study, and it becomes a habit. It becomes ingrained in you. Well, studying trailer music, sorry, I'm really starting to lose my voice now. But studying trailer music is really what's going to help you to figure out and learn what trailer music sounds like, so that when it comes time for you to write it, you know what to expect, and you can kind of pull from that understanding of it, the sound, and you'll know right then, okay, what I'm writing is trailer music, or what I'm writing is not trailer music, because you know what trailer music is by that point.
Right. Yeah. Do your research.
Yeah, exactly. Do your research.
Yeah. Right. You've given like so much value on this call. It's been awesome. Like, I feel like I've learned some stuff. Well, I definitely have learned some stuff. Like when you're off on your creative process, I was like, should I get my pencil? In fact, I did get my pen. So no, mate, you've given so much value. It's been, and also it's so nice to hear not just your story about how you got there, but also you've given so much detail in your creative process. And it's just, I find it really exciting because it's also.
I'm glad for that. That makes me happy.
Yeah. So now, if anyone wants to get in touch with you or find out, listen to your music, where should we send them?
Okay. My website is codystill.com, CODYSTILL.com. Just my first and last name. My email address, you can always email me, info@codystill.com. So pretty straightforward. I'm on Facebook, so just search for me on Facebook. I have a personal profile, which feel free to send me a friend request. May not approve it right away. I'm kind of slow about getting to that sometimes, because I have quite a lot in my queue, and I'm kind of lazy about it. But send me a request. I'll definitely accept you. I also have a professional whatever you want to call it, profile, Facebook page, Cody Still -composer. If you search for my name, it probably will come up. I'm on Twitter, at Still Cody. I'm also on Instagram. I think my handle on that is at Cody Still Music, I believe. I'm not on Instagram all the time, so
you're everywhere.
So yeah, I try to stay on all those.
You have
social media.
You have a pretty fantastic Facebook group, I believe, too.
Yes, I also have a Facebook group. My wife and I are the admins for the group. It's called the Trailer Music Composers Support Group. Definitely send us a request to join, and all we ask is that you answer the 2 questions during the invite process, or during the request process. So it'll ask you what your role is in trailer music. You can say composer, or if you're an editor, say editor, and so on, and then agree to the rules. That's it, and you can be in the group. We have like 4,000 people. Many publishers are part of the group. Publisher owners, supervisors of publishing groups, editors at the trailer houses, as well as a lot of the top tier composers in the group as well. So definitely join. There's a lot of stuff that's really great in the group that will help you as well.
Yeah, I second that, because the amount of value you can get from the comments and support in that group is phenomenal. It's and also it's so active. Like, I literally don't check it for a day, and I'm like, oh wow, there's like literally hundreds of things. It's amazing. The group,
we don't allow self-promotion, so that's one of the reasons that I think the group has been so successful. Because there's so many groups that it's just one post after the next of hey, check out my latest track, and there's nothing wrong with sharing your tracks and wanting to get feedback or wanting to promote yourself, but the group, we really wanted to focus on creating a connected network for other composers to connect with you. Usually what happens if you have a bunch of posts where it's, hey, check out my track, there's pretty much no interaction. It's just a post that everyone kind of ignores. And it's sad that it's that way, but it is that way, unfortunately. Yeah. So the group, we really want it to be more of a place for composers to connect with other composers. Because, think about it. I spend most of my time in this room here, right? I'm even outside of social isolation, social distancing. Composers are very isolated in general, just the nature of our role. So the group is a great place for you to be able to connect with other composers, build a network, create friends, and sort of have that relationship with other people that do what you do, especially for those who maybe don't live around other composers, especially trailer composers. Like, I'm in Texas, in Houston, Texas. I'm pretty much alone out here, right? There's not very many other composers in the state of Texas doing trailers.
No.
There are a couple I know of, but Texas is a huge state. I can't drive and see them. It's a great place to connect and just build a network and hang around some peers in the industry.
Yeah, and obviously get top quality banter. Hey.
And get some good advice, hopefully, along the way as well.
Yeah, that's it. Oh, yeah, sorry, the advice. Not banter.
Or banter, or...
Yeah. So, I just want to say thank you, Cody, for taking the time to answer all my questions for the listeners. And I'm sure everyone is going to absolutely love the show. It's certainly my favorite episode so far. So, thanks so much, man. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been fun, especially since, I haven't seen life outside these 4 walls in a little while. It's good to have another friendly face here and talk about something that I love, which is trailer music and music in general, and be able to share a little bit of my story and whatnot. And I have the deepest respect for you and your work and what you do. And so it's great to finally be able to meet you face to face and be able to connect and have a discussion. And I hope we can, keep it up and maybe touch base every now and again too.
Mate, definitely. Guys, I sincerely hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. That was an immense interview, immensely fun, and just absolutely filled with value and stuff that, I plan to implement myself. As ever, if you want to get into trailer music, head on over to the Trailer Music School, and also go and join up with Cody's Facebook group, the Trailer Music Composers Support Group. Tons of value there as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this. I really appreciate it. You guys are awesome.